Sometimes basketball players are so talented they skip college and go straight to the NBA. In this video, I'll be giving you 10 of the greatest players drafted straight out of high school. Hello there, welcome back to another video, you lovely people. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing with those bell notifications on to watch all the uploads. The way this list shook out, there wasn't enough room for each of these two to get a slide, and meanwhile, leaving them off this list altogether just didn't feel right. Therefore, kicking off the list as co-entrants, Jermaine Oneill and Tracy McGrady. Both of these players were at one time right behind Kobe Bryant and Tim Duncan as the finest wing scorer and power forward respectively in the NBA. McGrady twice led the league in scoring, was once such a coveted player that Orlando Magic officials received death threats after trading him to Houston. Oneill had a slow start in Portland after becoming only the third high schooler in the 90s to go straight to the pros. Eventually, he was traded to the Pacers where he developed into an elite big man with a combination of footwork, scoring touch, rebounding, and defense. He even placed in the race for the 2004 NBA MVP. Both of these players, however, were hobbled by injuries a little too early in their careers and will ultimately be remembered for how much more they could have done with a few extra years of prime basketball. Josh Smith was one multi-talented guy. He could score, airborne or otherwise, rebound, defend, run the floor, and even drop a pretty dime here and there. Drafted in 2004 by the Hawks, he burst on the scene as a fearsome aerial attacker and shot blocker. As a rookie, he once had 10 blocks and 0 fouls in a game, although he wasn't the most productive of youngsters overall. Over the years, he educated himself in those parts of basketball that didn't rely solely on one's ability to challenge gravity, and he became a perennial all-star candidate. While Darryl Dawkins was not the first player to ever be drafted out of high school, he was the first to go straight to the NBA. He would be followed 14 picks later by Bill Willoughby after the NBA would go 20 years before seeing another pro-to-pro leap. Also known as Chocolate Thunder, Dawkins was and still is the embodiment of power dunking. His ridiculously powerful dunks were too much for a regulation basket to withstand, and he was single-handedly responsible for the implementation of the breakaway rims we still have today. I'm kind of hesitant to include Shawn Kemp on this kind of list because although he was drafted without having played a college game, he did attend college and was not recruited out of high school. But for all intents and purposes, the Supersonics drafted a guy in 1989 that they'd only seen in high school action, so I guess it works. All off-court issues aside, Kemp will always be remembered in his heyday as one of the most athletic and prolific dunkers the league had ever seen. As a youngster, legend has it he once dunked so hard that sparks flew off the rim, and that very well may have been the NBA's biggest post seller for much of the 90s. A more Stoudemire but a reputation as perhaps the NBA's most dangerous post scorer while playing for the Phoenix Suns, where he, Steve Nash, and Shawn Marion spent a few years chewing up defenses in every way imaginable. He was also one of the NBA's more prolific rim wreckers and among one of the main attractions whenever the Suns played, although injuries almost always threatened to derail his career. Owner of perhaps the most well-developed physique ever seen in a high schooler where he came to Orlando in 2004, Dwight Howard has evolved into nothing less than a nightmare for the other players in the league. Howard's legacy, setting aside any rings he wins or damage he does to his image over the course of his incredible career, he would likely be that of a unique physical specimen who single-handedly determined a team's defensive personality. He should also be prominently featured on the nostalgic highlight reels of tomorrow. Kevin Garnett was at the forefront in the modern era of drafting high schoolers, as the league hadn't seen this happen since the 70s. When the Timberwolves took him 5th overall in 1995, he set off a decade of college skipping. He went on to become an all-star in what should have been his sophomore year in the NCAA. In the years that followed, Kevin Garnett was a 14-time All-Star, Most Valuable Player, Defensive Player of the Year, 9-time All-NBAer, and all-around household name. Garnett will go down as one of the most intense and technically diverse bigs in the NBA history, the lasting face of the Timberwolves, for the moment at least, and the man who helped Boston rediscover its championship roots. At number 3, we have the most ballyhooed and publicized athlete in the history of high school sports, LeBron James, a guy who was so heavily hyped that he was signed to a $90 million shoe deal before his first pro game. Since then, he's gone on to justify the hype and then some, becoming one of the greatest players in the history of basketball. Of course, LeBron James has somewhat of a huge ego, the spineless attitude, and its countless manifestations, and the uncannily bad finals record. Until further notice, the next two guys on this list will always have a leg up no matter how impressed we are with all of his highness. At number 2, we have the man who started it all, Moses Malone. Malone was drafted into the ABA at age 19 in 1974, and when the NBA-ABA merge took place in 1976, he landed on the Buffalo Braves. Unfortunately for them, the Braves didn't realize the caliber of player they had and let him go to the Houston Rockets. From there, Malone developed into the most prolific rebounder in the league, particularly on the offensive glass, and an offensive force in the low blocks. After 6 seasons in Houston, Malone was dealt to the 76ers, where he teamed with Julius Erving to bring a championship to Philadelphia in 1983. To this day, Malone remains the first and only player to win back-to-back MVPs on 2 different teams, and one of the most respected centers in NBA history, in the same class as the Bills, Wilts, and Kareems of years past. Kobe Bryant was the second high schooler after Garnett the previous year drafted into the NBA when the practice was revived in the mid-90s. He was selected by the Charlotte Hornets, who traded him to the Lakers for Vlade Divac. Kobe quickly became a fan favorite thanks to his unprecedented, at the time, athleticism and showmanship, and he quickly became a rising star in his first few years. Before long, he was a 20-point scorer and all-defensive team member, teaming with Shaq to form the most formidable 1-2 punch perhaps ever in this league, and to win 3 NBA titles in a row. A couple more years later, Kobe was a league-leading scoring machine of historical magnitude, just as Toronto, on an underachieving squad, by the way. After some important roster moves took the Lakers out of their post-Shaq funk, Kobe was once again winning rings, this time as the unquestioned leader of the team and more of a complete all-around player. That is a wrap for the video, guys. Remember to subscribe with those bell notifications on to keep up with every upload on this channel. If you made it this far in the video, I highly appreciate it. But before you leave, be sure to slap a like on it. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.